I've spent my entire life down here in Southwest Florida. It's a place that's constantly straddling two worlds, half wild, half city. You've got the pristine and the rundown, mansions just a stone's throw from places you would not walk past after dark, beachfront property rubbing shoulders with tangled swamp. You do not really notice just how loaded some folks are until you drive through one of those posh neighborhoods in Naples. All that wealth, yet unless you are a bartender with some serious flair, you will not see much of it trickling your way, especially come September. Down here, the year splits neatly into two seasons, hurricane and tourist. So, a couple of months back, when the economy decided to take a nosedive, I figured it was time to pick up a second job. Outside the only empty bar on a street full of life, I noticed an A-frame chalkboard that read, Ryan Collins Live, 8 to 10 p.m. I hauled my PA system inside, my eyes scanning the room. The bar had this odd clash of styles. Marble counters and stark, white walls on one side, then tacky metal signs on the other with phrases like, if you ain't fallen over yet, you need another beer. And, if beer is not the answer, you are asking the wrong question. The whole setup looked more at home in your uncle's man cave, the one he pieced together with a cartload of stuff from Hobby Lobby and discount websites. Once upon a time, somebody must have had a classy vision for the place. It had all the makings of a high-end lounge. But then, somewhere down the line, a new owner or manager came along and thought, you know what this place needs? A pool table and a dartboard. As I scanned the room, my eyes locked on the bartender before I even saw him properly. The look on his face screamed that he wanted to be anywhere but here. He was about my age, late 20s, dressed in a black button-down shirt with a black tie. I wondered if my polo shirt was a little too casual for the occasion. You need something, man? He asked, his voice carrying a faint accent I could not quite place, though it was definitely European. Yeah, I replied. I'm Ryan. I'm supposed to play here tonight. Liza did not mention over the phone where I should set up. He waved toward an open spot in front of the touch-tunes, right next to an ornate wine cabinet that seemed weirdly out of place. I bent down, hoisting my speakers over, and noticed a faded line on the floor where a rug used to be taped down. The duct tape residue had collected years of grime, and no one had bothered to clean it. It was a permanent scar on the mismatched decor. I was already feeling less enthusiastic about this gig, and this city for that matter. Setting up my gear took no time at all. The silver lining was that there were no drunks in the room giving me the I'm gonna yell free bird at the top of my lungs in 10 minutes stare. There were no drunks at all, actually. The place was completely dead. Just me and the bartender, who had told me his name, but whatever sound came out of his mouth was impossible for me to make sense of. For the next hour, I played alone. The only person to wander in was an old guy who immediately shuffled off to the restroom. My tip jar sat there as empty as a drained swamp. My fingers, rough and calloused from years of playing, started shedding little bits of skin every time I changed chords. Time dragged on, and by the time 10 o'clock rolled around, the bar finally had one regular, sitting as far away from me as possible. I rigged up my harmonica holder and slotted in a G-harp to play Seminole Wind. It got me thinking about when I was a kid and my dad used to take me out into the Everglades. He had this wild story he liked to tell about the skunk ape, basically Florida's take on Bigfoot. I ate it up. We would pack a lunch of bologna and cheese sandwiches, stock up on insect repellent with the strongest DEET we could find, grab flashlights, binoculars, and fishing gear, and head out into the swamp for the day, searching for any sign of the creature. My dad's old Saturn SUV would cruise down Alligator Alley like we were explorers on some grand expedition. The sunlight would slice through the trees, painting everything in shades of gold and pink as the day started. We would sit under a big cypress tree, sweating in the summer heat, getting eaten alive by mosquitoes, and enjoying our sandwiches. We never found anything, of course, but I never gave up hope. Even now, I am fascinated by the strange and mysterious, though I like to think I am a rational guy. I know most cryptids, Bigfoot, skinwalkers, and the like are probably not real, but if they do exist, They are just parts of nature we have not stumbled across yet. Nothing magical or supernatural about it. I still keep my guard up whenever I hit the trails. You just never know. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Tyler. He is the guy who landed me this less-than-stellar gig. Still, I could not complain too much. I would be walking away with $250 tonight. Tyler had only recently upgraded from the acquaintance zone to the good friend category. Everyone has their quirks, but Tyler can be a bit of a lot to deal with sometimes. Yo, big dog. Tyler's voice boomed through the phone. How's the hideout? You rackin' in the cash? Not exactly, I said, leaning against the wall between the out-of-order men's and women's restrooms while my iPad took care of the music. There's just one guy here, and he has not looked up from his beer since he sat down 10 minutes ago. Man, that sucks, Tyler said with exaggerated sympathy. If I am being real, though, I cannot stand Liza. She gives me major bitch vibes. Yeah, I do not know, dude, I replied, distracted. My mind wandered to the old man from earlier, wondering if he might have used the ladies' restroom by mistake. Oh, before I forget, Tyler said, shifting gears. You still looking for something steady, right? Tyler was about to save my ass again. Always, man. What have you got? Okay, so my uncle's buddy, or like, his friend's friend or something, needs help at this wildlife sanctuary or nature trail place. What kind of work are we talking about? Dude, it is nothing crazy. It is this big animal research center way out in the middle of nowhere. They just need a guy. A guy to do what? Man stuff. Watch the place, move heavy things if needed. It is like part security, part whatever else they need kind of deal. This place is just in the woods somewhere? Yeah, man. It is out near Fakahatchee or Picayune, I think. Easy money. You will be out there with a radio like, there is a bear. And that is it. Easiest gig ever. The guy at the far end of the bar started coughing, hard enough to turn heads, if there had been any heads to turn. The bartender did not even flinch, still glued to his phone, AirPods nestled in his ears. Text me the number, Tyler. I will check it out, I said. Type deal. Let me know if Liza gives you trouble. She stiffed me last week. The following Monday, I set out for the Gore Research Center. This place was way out in the sticks. Florida is funny like that. It mirrors the rest of the country, but everything is more compressed and turned up to 11. The money and the people are all along the coast, but you drive 25 minutes inland, and suddenly you might as well be in rural Louisiana. My house is 10 minutes from a Biden family member's place, but 20 minutes past that, my dad once found an overturned skiff hiding a bale of weed. Pro tip. Those things are packed tight. Do not try to stab one to take just a little. It is more effort than it is worth. They had prison crews cleaning up that mess for days. The trip to meet the lady in charge of the center took me about half an hour. My sedan was not exactly built for the terrain, but the weather had been dry for a few days, which worked in my favor. I veered off Golden Gate Parkway and into the depths of Picayune Strand State Forest. The further I drove, the worse the roads got. Houses along the way became fewer and farther between, falling into disrepair. American flags gave way to Trump flags, then Confederate flags, and eventually, just trees. Then I passed a road sign, End County Maintenance. The car jolted as I transitioned from pavement to rough limestone sand. A plume of dust kicked up behind me as the car rattled and groaned. Most of the journey was on unpaved roads, twisting through a maze of left and right turns. I passed the occasional RV parked in the middle of nowhere, shady wooden shacks suspended between trees, and even a dead deer near 130th Avenue. Finally, I reached the gate about 2 hours before sunset. My mud-splattered Hyundai idled as I waited for the entrance to open. I checked my messages with the contact Tyler had given me. The text had not gone through. I had 1 bar of LTE, which was better than I expected this far out. I fired off another message letting her know I was outside. While I waited, I took a look around. A weathered post held 3 signs, No trespassers. Keep out. Naithloriendum Wildlife Sanctuary. Be not overmuch wicked, neither be thou foolish. Why shouldest thou die before thy time? Ecclesiastes 7 verse 17. Moments later, the gate buzzed and slid open. The place looked like something out of Swiss Family Robinson. Towering oaks, cypress, and ficus trees surrounded the property. The driveway was overgrown and led to a winding staircase partially swallowed by a strangler figure. Jasmine vines climbed the porch railing, their wilting flowers scattered across the ground. Spanish moss draped the branches, and an observation deck perched on what looked like the third floor. It was like the forest was slowly reclaiming the place. A woman in her early 60s stepped out onto the porch. Her jet-black hair was streaked with gray at the roots. "Ryan, so great to see you," she called, her voice much louder than I had expected. "Deb, nice to finally meet you in person," I shouted back, matching her energy. I climbed the rickety stairs with my hand extended, determined to make a good impression. A breeze brushed my palm, and I realized it was damp with nervous sweat. "Come in, son. He'll let you get your bearings," Deb said, ushering me inside. The house, or whatever you'd call it, was spotless. But house felt like the wrong word. It was sterile, almost museum-like. There were no TVs, no kitchen appliances, nothing that said someone actually lived here. The only exception was a lone coffee maker perched on a welcome desk in the entryway. Above it hung a portrait of a white-haired, bearded man smiling warmly, a golden retriever at his side. They were seated on the front steps of the staircase, before the strangler fig claimed it. Deb shrugged off her jean jacket, tossing it onto a coat rack by the door, then clasped her hands together with the energy of someone about to launch into a sales pitch. She rocked from heel to toe as she began. "Well, welcome to the Education Center. This used to be Dr. Bob's home. We do tours, craft days, and sometimes field trips. Well, not often. It's a bit far, and schools tend to avoid places with, shall we say, negative connotations. But that doesn't stop us from doing incredible work." Her eyes lit up as she spoke. I nodded, trying to keep up. "This is a conservation site," she continued, gesturing broadly. "We're working to restore this area to its natural habitat, a hardwood cypress swamp forest. We're right here in the Picayune Strand and smack dab in the middle of Big Cypress's critical area of state concern." She led me down a corridor lined with framed photographs and newspaper clippings, each captioned like a museum exhibit. "We document everything: tree growth, panther populations, water quality, you name it. The further people are from these vital environments, the more they seem to thrive." She spun around suddenly, her gaze locking onto mine. "During the day," I smiled awkwardly. "Keep Florida wild," I blurted out, repeating an Instagram caption I'd seen somewhere. Her face lit up. "Exactly. Yes, that's perfect. I like that." I felt a twinge of guilt for the lack of originality, but I nodded along, pretending I'd meant it as deeply as she seemed to believe. Deb clapped her hands, breaking the silence. "Oh, your W-9 and everything else. I'll bring that by tomorrow morning when I meet you. For now, let me show you around a bit." She spun on her heel and led me back toward the front door. "This was Robert's entertaining area," she explained, motioning to the room we'd just passed. Though it was really just for him. He didn't get many visitors. Most people described him as, well, a bit of a curmudgeon. As we approached the reception desk, my eyes caught a word above the door. Naithloriendum. I pulled out my phone to Google it, but before I could type it in, Deb interrupted. "Most of what you'll need is in or under here," she said, gesturing to the desk. She grabbed a charging cable and handed it to me. "Thanks," I said. "Absolutely. Now follow me. I'll show you some of the exhibits upstairs." We climbed the staircase, Deb rapping on the handrail 3 times as we ascended. The air grew heavier, carrying a faint, nostalgic smell of mildew. At the top, she reached for an ancient, yellowed light switch. Click. Nothing. This damn thing. she muttered, flipping the switch up and down 3 times. Finally, the overhead fluorescence sputtered to life with a mechanical hum, casting a dim, uneven glow over the room. Taxidermied animals lined the walls. A bear, a couple of wild boar, a buck and a doe, a bald eagle, gopher tortoises, and otters, all frozen in lifeless poses. A nearly 6-foot-long tarpon hung on the left wall. Deb pointed to the bald eagle. "Don't worry, that one's incredibly old." I must have looked bewildered because she started explaining the origins of the animals, tossing in fun facts I barely heard as I scanned the room, mentally cataloging everything. Then, my eyes fell on a plain wooden door at the end of the hall, painted with the silhouette of a wild hog. "What's in there?" I asked. "That's the pig room," she said matter-of-factly. I almost blurted, "The fuck?" but caught myself just in time. "Pardon?" "The pig room," she repeated, as if that clarified anything. "Is it exactly what you think it is?" "Yes." I had no clue what the hell that meant, but before I could ask, she pushed the door open. The room was dimly lit, with speckled shadows creeping in through a curtained window tangled in jasmine vines. Deb strode to the center and pulled a cord. Light flickered to life, illuminating a bizarre shrine to pigs. Glass cases and dioramas lined the walls, filled with sketches, notes, photographs, and jars. A dozen or more fetal pigs floated in formaldehyde on an old wooden bookcase. Nearby, veterinary manuals and textbooks with embossed titles like The Embryology of the Pig filled the shelves. A crate held a tangle of boar tusks, and pinned to the wall was a photocopied diagram of a pig embryo, more manatee-shaped than pig-like. At the center of the room stood a stainless steel table, slightly slanted toward a drain. Scalpels, a bone saw, and other medical tools I didn't recognize lay in its shallow trough. Nearby, a display showcased paper-thin slices of a pig, preserved under glass, each one meticulously highlighting different layers of anatomy. Deb stood beside me, beaming. Well, I muttered under my breath, "That's something." I ran my hand along the cool surface of the operating table, the metal marred with years of scratches and wear. Turning, I caught sight of the cages. 8 in total, empty but exuding a quiet melancholy. Dusty hay and stained straw lay scattered on the ground in each of the small cells, barely 2.5 feet wide and 5 feet deep. The room had no distinct smell, just the stale air of forgotten things. "Bob took his research very seriously," Deb said, breaking the silence. "Yeah, no kidding," I thought. "I don't think they sell pig slices on Amazon." The advancements Bob made in veterinary medicine are truly astounding. I surveyed the shelves, textbooks, and the overall macabre atmosphere of the room. "Well, I can't say this is exactly what I was expecting." Deb just huffed and shrugged, then knocked on the door 3 times before heading for the next floor. Once the tour was over, I followed her outside to the driveway. "I'll be back at 8 tomorrow to get your report on the night shift. There's usually not much going on, as you'd expect. If you get bored, I've got some filing to do in Bob's downstairs study. Also, I think there's a crudite platter in the break room fridge." "Thank you, Deb. I really appreciate this opportunity." "Absolutely, Isaiah. Just don't let the isolation get to you." With a final twirl of her keys, she unlocked the Jeep with 3 sharp clicks, climbed in, and kicked up a dust cloud as she sped off. I watched her car shrink into the distance, turning off DeSoto Road, heading back toward civilization. The roar of the engine gradually faded into nothing, until there was silence. I turned down 40th Avenue and spotted a sign not far ahead. Dr. Robert H. Gore 3 Preserve. "Hell yeah," I muttered, instinctively picking up my pace. My sneakers crunched against the gravel as I jogged toward the trailhead. Twilight had just begun to set in, and by the time I reached the 2-mile loop sign, the forest greeted me with the distant coo of an osprey. The only sounds were the gentle swaying of palm fronds and pine needles, interrupted by the occasional snap of a branch. Felt familiar, like I'd been here before. I started a hike on my Apple Watch, eager to stretch my legs after the bumpy ride and the strange interview with Deb. Her warning echoed in my mind. Don't let the isolation get to you. What did she mean by that? I realized, after what felt like an eternity of walking, that I wasn't paying close attention to the path. A mossy oak tangled with a sable palm stood to my right, consumed by overgrowth. To my left, old Florida pines towered, some alive, others rotting and full of woodpecker holes. The path narrowed ahead, flanked by toppled palms. Behind me, the daylight was rapidly fading, quickened my pace. The more I moved, the more I realized how much the terrain had changed. What had once been a smooth, mowed path was now scattered with rocks, roots, and hidden holes. The taller grass obscured my footing, making the path more treacherous. With each step, every bird call, every rustle of wings, seemed louder. A branch caught my arm, leaving a thin cut. As the sun sank lower, the bird shadows above began to resemble the menacing silhouettes of thunderbirds, like creatures out of a hurricane. Branches, twisted and claw-like, seemed to reach out, threatening to pull me back into the dust. I reached into my pocket for my phone. I'd left it on the front desk. I didn't have a flashlight. I froze, the pit in my throat widening as the cool Florida air pressed in. My mind struggled to focus, but fear began to cloud my thoughts. I pushed forward, quickening my pace. I'd hiked at night before, but that was on short, familiar trails. This was different. New territory. The trail was supposed to be a loop, one way in, one way out. Or so I thought. I rounded a bend and hit a dead end. Nothing but a thicket of dense vegetation and tangled palmettos. I wasn't lost, not yet. I could just turn around, retrace my steps. But the orange sky had completely faded, replaced by an inky blackness that swallowed everything. I turned and ran, not caring for the rocks or branches that snagged at my legs. I just needed to get out of here. Palmetto fronds whipped against my shoulders. My footsteps echoed in the silence, muffled only by my frantic breathing. My left foot wedged itself under a root. By the time I realized what was happening, I had already hit the ground. A rush of panicked breaths fled my lungs in a single moment as my chest collided with the forest floor. My left hand scraped against dirt and leaves, and my right palm brushed against the surface of a moss-covered stone. If there was any air left in my lungs, I might have laughed at myself. That is, until I realized my footsteps hadn't stopped. Call it delirium, call it adrenaline, but I could have sworn that as I fell, I heard footsteps continuing in my pace. My cheek pressed to the earth, vision blurred. I became acutely aware of every sound and smell around me. I heard nothing. No birds. No rustling rodents. No twigs snapping underfoot. No critters moving through the brush. Just the wind, gently whistling through the palmetto branches. The air was thick with the acrid scent of ammonia and urine, quickly replaced by the subtle stench of rotting fruit and eggs. Then, a prickling sensation washed over me. A sudden, unsettling feeling that I was being watched. It wasn't just an awareness. It was as though every living thing in the forest had focused its gaze on me. Fear locked me in place. The old survival rule popped into my head. If it's black, fight back. If it's brown, lie down. But there were no brown bears in Florida, as far as I knew, so this was going to be a fight-back scenario. Unless, of course, the rules change if you're already lying down. There was only one way out, forward. And if something was out there, it was behind me. At least, that's what I told myself. Plink. What the hell was that? Plink. Closer this time. It sounded like something had fallen, just a few feet from my head. Plink. Shit. I muttered, breaking the unspoken rule of silence the forest had set upon me. I could see it now, a rock. A small rock, just landing inches from my face. Plink. I think something just tossed a rock past my head. The pain in my body suddenly became the least important thing. I pushed against the limestone and dirt, forcing my body upright. I spun around, searching for whatever lay behind me. Nothing. There was no way in hell I was going to wait for whatever it was to show itself. Heart hammering, mind racing, I took off. My feet moved faster than I could think. Rocks, holes, and branches grew more sparse as I pushed forward. The back of my shoes tore into my Achilles tendon, but I didn't care. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it might burst from my chest. My lungs fought to take in air, each breath quick and shallow. I could hear more footsteps, more than just mine. I was being pursued. Instinct kicked in. Adrenaline drove me forward, and my conscious mind retreated into a blind, primal state. I wasn't human anymore. I was prey. I burst through the trailhead, my footfalls thundering against the dirt road. I risked a glance over my shoulder as I ran back toward Naithloriendum. My pursuers were still on the trail. I scaled the staircase in a blur and slammed the door behind me. The silence of the space was deafening. I leaned against the door, sliding down to the floor, completely spent. I lay there for a moment, trying to catch my breath. My mind flickered back to reality. Fear still held every fiber of my body, but reason began to seep in. It was just adrenaline. It was just the dark. It wasn't real. The reassuring balm of denial started to settle in. The air was still frigid. I started to recognize some things Deb hadn't made clear. There was no air conditioning in this house. How does a house in the middle of Florida not have central heating and air? I went to the downstairs restroom to assess the damage. My palms were red and sore, but nothing too serious. I was covered in dirt and leaves, and there were a few deep scratches on my left cheek. I looked like hell, but otherwise I was fine. I turned on the sink to clean the cuts and shook the dirt off my clothes, dumping it into the bathtub. When I removed my left sneaker, I winced. I'd never broken a toe before, but I knew they weren't supposed to be purple. I stared at myself in the mirror. What the hell was that? I folded a sheet of toilet paper and dabbed cold water around my cuts, trying to distract from the dark circles under my eyes. I was tired, maybe even overtired. Was there anything there at all? A voice from the back of my head rose. No. I know what I saw. What did you see? I couldn't answer. I didn't see anything. But I knew what I heard. But what did you hear? Footsteps. The rock. Rationally explain everything? The forest was dark. My adrenaline was pumping. And my mind could have been playing tricks on me. Maybe a coyote. Or less agreeably, a panther. But any explanation took too much mental effort to make sense. My brain was already stiff, rigid, and the last thing it needed was more strain. I would have gone out to my car to grab my guitar, to distract myself, but there was a better chance of finding a winning lottery ticket in a haystack while being struck by lightning in a frozen hell than me going back out there anytime soon. I plopped onto the couch in front of the massive limestone fireplace. I needed to rest my eyes, just for a moment. Every blink grew heavier, as if the weight of the day was shifting from my heart to my eyelids. I was out for 5 minutes. The next hour was spent exploring the interior of my new workplace. If the pig room was any indication, there had to be more to this place than what met the eye. Dr. Gore was an established author, and I found a few of his books in his study. Nothing on pigs, though. Aside from the swine's disturbing presence above me, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. This was just a tiny museum, a display of a man's life and passion, deep out in the sticks, about 20 miles east of nowhere. What was the point of it all? Why keep it standing? Why keep it open for visitors? These questions swirled in my mind until one broke through and planted itself firmly at the front of my thoughts. Why am I here? Tonight's wages would cover health insurance for the month. Tomorrow's would pay for a week of meal kits. But that wasn't what I meant. Why was I here? Why did they need someone here? What was I protecting? And from what? I was just here to keep an eye on things, right? This thought bothered me as I made my way to the top of the stairs and entered the cupola. As I paced around the observation deck, another question pushed all others aside, demanding attention. Don't let the isolation get to you. Deb's final words echoed in my mind like a warning. I limped up the stairs, purple-toed with an abrasion-riddled face, because I had let it get to me. I was going mad, paranoid. If I didn't pull myself together, I wouldn't make it through the night. Plink. My blood ran cold. My temples pounded like timpani drums, each beat growing more frantic. My peripheral vision narrowed to a single point. Frozen in space and time, I waited for more. 5 agonizingly slow minutes passed. Surrounded by glass on all sides, I stared out into the dark. On the other side, nothing but Spanish moss and shadows. A steady overcast of cumulonimbus clouds smothered the stars and the dim crescent moonlight. Wind howled through the trees, building to a mighty crescendo until, plink. I knew I didn't imagine it. This time I saw it. Pebble hit the window. I staggered back, instantly aware of the fishbowl I trapped myself in. I had to get out of there. The windowless room downstairs, the study, was my best option. I carefully descended the stairs, avoiding the glaring eyes of the taxidermy bear as I passed the second floor. I stayed away from the animals, not wanting to get too close. It had gotten even colder downstairs, a draft that made goosebumps crawl across my skin. I rounded the welcome desk and grabbed my phone from the charger. It hadn't charged at all. The battery was down to 20%. The wind outside was getting louder as I rested my hand on the golden stanchion. Something on the desk caught my eye, a yellowed, aged newspaper clipping. Asterisk December 19th, 2000 homeowner shoots at alleged trespasser's vehicle. 1 teen dead. Asterisk I stared at the article, the ink and paper seemingly older than it should have been. A sudden rattling noise broke my focus, coming from the back of the house. It sounded like a branch scraping against the hurricane shutters. I ignored the study and quietly moved toward the back of Naithloriendum. The window was open. As the wind swept through the house, I felt it in my bones. Something was wrong. The part of me that had rationalized my pursuer in the forest as a hallucination was now silenced, and I almost wanted it to apologize. Then I heard a clattering noise upstairs. It sounded like something had tripped over one of the taxidermy projects. Eggs, fruit, ammonia, urine. The foul stench filled the air like a noxious perfume. It had found me. I don't care how much I'm getting paid. I'm not staying here another minute. I muttered to myself as I bolted for the door. I pulled out of the driveway and turned onto DeSoto, eager to escape the nightmare that had swallowed me whole. I started the hour-long trek back to civilization, out of this godforsaken wood. My phone buzzed, and I quickly tried to send a message to Deb. Shit went down tonight. I don't know WTF is going on up here, but I want no part of it. Front gate closed and door locked, key under the mat. If you knew what I was getting into, I'm very disappointed. The message wouldn't send. No service. My heart sank, but I quickly remembered Harvey and tried to send him a message instead. Hey bro, who the hell told you about this gig at the nature center? There's some crazy shit up here. I pulled my focus back to the road. The Hyundai's headlights sliced through the darkness, illuminating the towering pines that lined the street. Mud, dust, and dirt splattered against my already battered car. Despite the lack of traffic, I kept my speed steady at 35 miles per hour. And then, the scarlet glow of my taillights flickered across the road behind me. A figure darted out from the trees. It was a child. At 2 in the morning on a desolate backcountry road, deep in an old Florida state forest, a 4-foot-tall child had just sprinted across the road behind my car, narrowly avoiding death. Normally, I would have stopped, but not tonight. The woods couldn't pull that trick on me again. I wasn't falling for it. Whatever had gotten me out here before wasn't going to stop me now. But as I focused on the road ahead, I felt it. The sudden shift in the atmosphere. Most Januaries in Florida get only 1 full day of rainfall. Apparently, tonight was the second. The sky opened up, and the rain came down in sheets, engulfing my vehicle, the trees, and most importantly, the dirt road ahead. The once rugged terrain began to shift under the weight of the water. My tires dug into the earth, carving new grooves as the loam began to break up. I was focused, hyper-aware of my surroundings, when the corner of my vision caught something in the rearview mirror. The child was chasing my car. At an inhuman speed, the silhouette steadily sprinted through the slurry kicked up behind my back tires. My fingers fumbled, desperately switching the car into sport mode. I slammed my foot to the gas pedal and lurched forward. Anything not tied down slipped and fell toward the back seat as I pumped the accelerator, my grip tight on the steering wheel. The bumps in the road amplified, sending me into brief but jarring moments of airtime. The wipers frantically swept rain and mud to either side. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The child was galloping on all fours, unbothered by the speed, the mud, or the rain. The thing persisted, moving with inhuman fervor. Its head pointed to the ground, its limbs flailing in wild abandon. It was gaining on me. I passed the skeletal remains of a deer on 130th. My heart raced as I gripped the wheel tighter, but I knew I was losing control. I hydroplaned. The car spun out, and I careened off the road, narrowly missing a pine tree as I sailed into a field. The tires screeched and squealed as I involuntarily did donuts in the clearing, the car finally grinding to a stop. The rain fell in a steady, rhythmic patter, the only sound that filled the car, except for the buzzing of my wrist, signaling I had just been in an accident. I couldn't find my phone. Panic clawed at my insides as a fiery tension spread down my neck, following my spine and radiating through my limbs. I struggled to regain composure, my head spinning and my stomach in knots. I cut the engine. I'm gonna stay here a short while, I muttered to myself. I sat there, trying to work the tension out of my hands. Breathe in, breathe out. I leaned my head back, pressing it into the headrest. A metallic, iron-tasting liquid had pooled in my mouth, trickling down my chin. I spat it into the cup holder. Plink, 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 plink. Frantically, I jammed my thumb into the steering wheel and reached for the ignition. Click, click, click. I pumped the stiff brake pedal, forcing the key clockwise. Click, click, click. Again. Click, click, click. Plink. The sound was now unmistakable. I whipped my eyes up to the windshield, and the last pebble struck dead center. My vision blurred in a panic as I saw something dart out of my periphery. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and now I could hear the faint sound of footsteps scampering around the car. Wham! It hit my passenger door with a deafening crash, followed by a chorus of thuds as it scaled the roof, then leaped onto the hood. It stared directly at me. What the fuck is that? The words tumbled out, jumbled in shock and fear. The child's fur was grizzled brown, slick with rain. Its small, beady black eyes darted between me and the contents of my car. Its little chest rose and fell in quick breaths as its cleft four-fingered hands explored the windshield. The thing pressed its snout to the glass, green and gray plasma bubbling from its gaping nostrils. I honked the horn, slamming it in frantic protest. The sound echoed like a call to arms. It squealed, furiously reacting to the noise. With a tusked snarl, it dug into my windshield with its sharp tusk, flailing wildly before launching itself back into the darkness. It scampered off on all fours into the black night. My windshield cracked under the force of its strike. I tried to start the car again. The engine sputtered. My headlights flickered, casting a dim light on the creature just ahead. I could see its wild form crouched in the shadows, watching. Then, from the tree-line, came the growls, low and guttural, rising in intensity until they filled the night. A chorus of high-pitched whines pierced the air as a tribe of wild hogs emerged from the thicket. Some hairy, some nude, with fur in patches brown, black, and tusks of every shape and size. Their soulless eyes locked onto me. The pack of grotesque, bipedal swine stumbled forward, snorting and squealing. Their approach was slow at first, but the tension rose with every passing moment. My car refused to move no matter how much I screamed at it. I pumped the accelerator and shook the wheel, but we were stuck. One of the pigs hit my car with such force that it left a bloodied snout print on the window. It stumbled back, dazed, before reaching a four-fingered hoof to the mark. It began licking its own blood. The others took notice. A larger beast with tusks like swords moved forward, examining the bloodied snout. It snorted and drove its tusks into the throat of the injured hog, tearing at its flesh. The smaller pigs followed, ripping and gnawing, tearing at the body in a frenzy. I watched, horrified, as they devoured their own kind in a barbaric feast. Blood-soaked faces turned toward me, their eyes gleaming with hunger. With the pigs now focused on the feast, I grabbed a handful of McDonald's napkins from the glove box. I spit the blood from my mouth into the napkins and shoved them into the crack of my window. I quickly rolled it back up, suspending the blood outside, above the chaos. One of the pigs, left outside the fray, sniffed the air. Its snout twitched, and a terrible scream rang out. It locked eyes with me, and one by one, the hogs stopped feasting. Their attention shifted toward me. The hogs pushed and rocked my car, trying to overturn it. The entire vehicle teetered on the edge. With a screech, the engine roared to life, and I shot forward, tearing through the mud and gravel, away from the swarm. The hogs pursued on all fours, their grunts and squeals filling the air. I cracked the window again, and the blood-soaked napkins fluttered out behind me. The pigs stopped, spinning around to chase them. The pack of grotesque hogs fell away, fading into the darkness. A final bump in the road told me I was nearing civilization. The rough gravel road gave way to the smooth, asphalted path of Golden Gate Parkway. I pushed the car harder, my hands shaking. Within minutes, I found myself at a Waffle House off exit 101. Ignoring the battered, bloodied, and mud-caked state of the car, I grabbed my iPad from the guitar case, shoved a forkful of eggs and sausage into my mouth, and began typing. The sun's starting to rise now, and the waitress behind the counter keeps glancing at me like I'm crazy. I don't know if anyone will believe what happened out there in the Picayune, but I know I'll never go back to the blocks in the Golden Gate Estates. Just as I'm about to pay, I swear I see a rock plink against the window.